In pretty much every shooter game I've played over the years, there's been plenty of cases where not having a specific name for a position on the map has cost me the win. In the defense of most games though, they either implement decent callouts in-game or have existed long enough to the point where the competitive community built around them has determined an agreed upon set of callouts for the most important parts of the map. So me not knowing the callouts means it's just a skill issue. But what if there was a shooter game that had nothing of the sort? What would you do then? Returning viewers of this channel already know that my favorite shooter game at the moment is a free-to-play anime tactical shooter called Strinova. Its game-defining mechanic, Stringify, or as the community likes to call it, paper mode, while it does look kinda goofy, don't worry, I thought the same thing too at first, makes both the movement and gunplay in this game so interesting and so fun. You can glide around the map, you can climb up walls by literally sticking onto them like it's a link between worlds, and you can even sidestep mid-gunfight and dodge bullets like you're in the Matrix. And even setting paper mode aside, you also have stuff like double jumps that you can use to completely reverse your aerial momentum, compounded with full accuracy while aiming down sights in the air, and a shoulder aiming mode separate from ADS that makes fighting in close to mid-range way more bearable. All of these things combined makes for a tactical shooter experience that is truly one of a kind. But okay, that's enough glazing. Strinova does have a big problem. The in-game map callouts kinda suck ass. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a gunfight and been shot from a very common spot that you will literally always find an enemy playing from, and yet I simply cannot think of how to communicate that position to my teammates. Compared to Valorant, who has in its favor an already very solid and intricate in-game map callout system in place for new players, Strinova's in-game map callout system will just leave out so many important parts of the map. On top of that, there is just an insane amount of angles and verticality compared to other tactical shooters just because of how the game works, which obviously makes developing proper callouts way harder. But that also has a converse issue, being that with so many positions an enemy could be playing from, just saying he's up there is way more confusing and helps even less. So clearly, something has to be done about this. I used to play competitive Splatoon 3 for about a year after it came out, and one thing that I really liked about the scene in that game was that the community had made it a priority to create standardized callouts for all competitors to use. If you wanted to know how to comm on a map, you could find the callouts everyone else was using within seconds. It was that simple. They were easy to find as a Splatoon player, competitive or casual, so I thought, surely we could have something like that for Strinova. But I couldn't find anything of the sort, at least not in English. There might be some universally agreed callout system in the Chinese Strinova community, but unfortunately, and this may come as a shock to some, I'm not Chinese. So I wouldn't know. If that's the case, and there isn't an agreed upon set of map callouts that's easily accessible to the whole community yet, then maybe that's something that needs to be fixed. And that's where I come in, a player fresh out of silver who has never once competed in Strinova in his life. Yep, I'll take care of it. In all seriousness though, I would like for there to be map callouts that the whole community can agree upon and use. I'm not trying to come in here and be like, you all have to use my callouts now. I don't have much confidence that my callouts will work for everyone, so if they don't, that's fine by me. There's really only two reasons why I've decided to do this. One is that I don't have any callouts to use, and I don't see anyone else making a big post about them, so I thought maybe I could be the one to take care of that, just in case there were other people who have been looking for the same thing I was. The other reason is that I just want to see if it's even possible to make decent map callouts for this game. You'd think that at this point, even with the game being still relatively young, we'd have already had a bunch of map callouts figured out. After all, this is a tactical shooter. Not having decent callouts is kind of a big problem. So maybe there's a reason for this. I want to find out what that reason may be. This video is pretty different from the videos I made in the past, so I'm basically trying out something new here. It took me a while to work on this, so if you like this experimental kind of content, please let me know what you think in the comments and what you'd like to see next from me. And of course, consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Now I know for certain that I am not the first person to attempt making English map callouts for Strinova, so I figured I'd at least start with some research on what people before me have done, and pull some inspiration from those. I found this Reddit post and this tweet that gave me a better idea of what areas of each map I should be looking to cover with my map callouts. I also really liked some of the callouts used, and decided I would probably steal them to use for myself. On the other hand, there were definitely some map callouts that I was probably not going to use, like those named after people who I definitely do not know. Like, who the f is Greg? But with all of that out of the way, it was time to start taking things into my own hands. Before I got started on making my own map callouts, I thought it was important to establish exactly what makes a callout good in the first place. Let's first get the obvious things out of the way. It has to be short and sweet. When you're in the middle of a chaotic gunfight with very little time to process outside information, you're gonna want to hear something like, "One in heaven," and not, "One in the small room with the window and the pillar." At the same time, it has to be intuitive and just make sense. You shouldn't be calling a long sightline something like hubby. This includes a genre of map callouts that are just named after someone important in the community. Strinova is still a very new game, and there haven't been many huge community moments that I know of where a name callout would typically originate from. This is maybe more opinionated from me, but I'd also like to avoid reusing callouts within the same map. There's of course the very generic or obvious ones, like using link to specify the areas of the map that connect different sections, and you can differentiate between them by preceding each one with a site letter or the term mid to refer to the middle of the map. But outside of those cases, I want to try to make map callouts more unique while still keeping them simple to understand and pick up. And lastly, I want to pull inspiration for map callouts from other popular shooter games. For people already familiar with doing callouts from those games, it should already establish a sense of familiarity and intuitiveness for them from the get-go. With my own set of guidelines now established, I finally went into the actual task of making these callouts. But I soon realized something. Some of these maps are disgustingly difficult to make callouts for. Remember what I said earlier about trying to find out why hardly anyone had tried making proper callouts for this game? I think I understand why now. There were two big problems that I ran into when trying to make map callouts for Strinova. First off, while more intricate callouts are necessary in certain instances, Strinova is generally a game where people are constantly moving around the map, so in some cases you may have someone potentially jumping through 3 or more positions within a few seconds. And my solution to that? Well, I don't really have one. I decided to add more intricate callouts in certain areas like bomb sites as an option for players to use. But depending on the situation, you might have to generalize the callouts that you're using to some degree. How would you go about naming this corner of B site on Cauchy Street? It's not a particularly distinct area of the map that you'll be pushing through most of the time, but it's still relevant enough to give it a name. Usually for spots like those, you'd look at some unique detail about it that makes it different from other spots. So let's go through a few things we could go off. Grass patch in the corner? No, that's on other parts of the map too. The yellow wall? Definitely not. Those are everywhere. The wooden crates? Also everywhere. Though I do think the maps in this game can be quite pretty when you look at the details, they have an issue in reusing these same details in multiple parts of the map, limiting what makes each location on the map visually distinguishable from each other. This, unsurprisingly, makes it very difficult to make callouts that are both unique and also make sense in the context of their location. There are only so many parts of the map that I can call box or hall. That's why most map callout terminology relies on specific details of the locations. For example, in Valorant, you have in-game callouts like tree, because the only big tree on the map happens to be in that room. Or even community-made callouts like dog, because of the dog that only appears on the wall in that specific spot. On the other hand, it feels like the Strinova maps weren't really designed with the need for callouts in mind, so they often lack these details. I ended up having to take some creative liberties with naming some spots. Apologies in advance if some of the callouts seem either uncreative or too creative. I did the best that I could in the end. And now, finally, it's time to actually get into each map. I'll be going through these pretty quick, so feel free to pause if you need to. Let's get started with Area 88. And that covers every current demolition map in Strinova. I didn't cover the Escort or Team Arena maps in this video because 1, that would take forever, 2, I don't play those modes so I don't care, and 3, both modes are pretty casual oriented so callouts wouldn't be very valuable. I left a link to a folder containing all of the map callouts I've made for Strinova in the description, which I plan to update as new demolition maps come out. If you found this video entertaining or helpful in any way, please leave a like, and please consider subscribing to the channel if you want a free and easy way to support the content that I make. Thank you so much for watching.